Howdy, my totally always tubular gamers, another day, another ranking video, and today we're going to be looking at a pretty beloved series of games. We're going to be looking at the Rayman series of games. We're going to be ranking all of the games in the Rayman franchise. This list was requested, so thanks for that. You can always let me know in the comments what you want to see me rank, like, share, sub, all that good stuff. Now, Rayman has been around since 1995, originally releasing on the Atari Jaguar as a 2D platformer. Since then, Rayman has gone on to be in a ton of different adventures, and all of these games are by Ubisoft. Rayman was even Ubisoft's mascot for a time, I'd say probably up until the mid-2000s, where it became the Assassins of Assassin's Creed, and nowadays I have no idea what Ubisoft's icon or mascot would be. Now, the Rayman series is primarily a platformer series with a mix of 2D and 3D games. However, our limbless hero has starred in a number of spin-offs. Some of these spin-offs are interesting, but Rayman also starred in another series that would go on to be its own full-fledged series by Ubisoft, known as the Rabbids series. It started with Rayman raving rabbids, and then eventually they phased Rayman out and it was just about the rabbids. For this list, we're going to keep it simple, and any game that is about the rabbids primarily is not going to be on this list, so no Rayman raving rabbids 1 or 2 or any other rabbids games. Those could be their own list. We are looking at games where Rayman is the focal point. A lot of these games are really beloved for their storytelling, their characters, their interesting world, their sense of humor, their platforming, and really the great level design. I also am a big fan of a lot of these games, and coming up with this list was actually way harder than I thought it would be, especially near the end, where I feel very strongly about the last couple games, and honestly it just kind of depends on the day of the week for which one I like the most. But for now, here's my list of worst to best Rayman games. Hopefully this list is outdated one day because we get some more Rayman games. Please, Ubisoft, stop fucking around with NFTs and Tom Clancy. Let's get another Rayman game, and not this mobile crap either. There's no mobile games on here. Why does Rayman have so many mobile games? No mobile games here. So let's start it off. What do I think is the worst of the worst? It's not even close. Rayman Brain Games, or also known as Rayman Jr., is the worst of the Rayman series. This is an educational game by Ubisoft. It has exercises in phonics and mathematics, and you know what, honestly, I don't really want to talk about this game. It's an educational game. Of course, it's the worst one.
You think I'll let go for a little educational television? Oh, no! Ah!
Our next game is an interesting one. It is Rayman HOODLUMS Revenge, released for the Game Boy Advance. It is an isometric platformer and takes place after Rayman 3. The plot sees Glowbox dealing with the consequences of what he did at the end of Rayman 3 and Rayman trying to help his friend out. It gets a little bit more in depth than that in the story. I mean, it's fine enough, but it's not Rayman 3 quality. The gameplay is, like I said a second ago, an isometric platformer. I'll just be real, I don't like isometric platformers. I don't like the angle, I don't like the controls, I think it's awkward, I don't like the blind jumps, and I really think combat just doesn't really work in this kind of setting. Sonic 3D Blast, the Jimmy Neutron Game Boy Advance game, the Spyro GBA games, I think they're all pretty bad. This is a little bit better, but I still am not a big fan of this. Your objective really is to go from point A to B. You mostly play as Rayman, but there are a few levels where you get to play as Glowbox, and towards the end of the game you actually get to play as both of them in the same level where you switch off. It's actually pretty decently faithful to Rayman 3, where you throw your fist to fight the enemies. It even has a lock-on. The platforming, while awkward, isn't terrible, and a lot of the power-ups from Rayman 3 come back as well. Unfortunately, the kick-ass level design from Rayman 3 does not return, as most of the levels I thought were very dull, flat, and don't really offer all that much to them, and the game overall actually kind of feels a bit repetitive since most of these levels do get stale rather quickly. And I know that yes, it is a Game Boy Advance game, there is some limitations and some compromises, but there are plenty of games on the GBA that I think have great level design. This is not one of them. I think it kind of dampens the entire experience, as I didn't really have all that much fun with it playing through the game, and the game is stupid short. The game's like 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours long. There's not much to it. I can't really recommend this game to anybody, but it is an interesting note in Rayman's history. Our next game is another interesting one. It is a spin-off. It is Rayman Arena, also known as Rayman M, and there's a remake on the PlayStation known as Rayman Rush, but all of these are basically the same game. They are a multiplayer party game developed by Ubisoft. I played this on the GameCube back in the day and was pretty unsure of what I thought about the game then, and even nowadays I'm like, what even was this game? The game has two modes. It has a racing mode where you race on foot, and there's a combat mode where you're in an arena and you fight each other. The game uses Rayman 2's assets and controls, so it feels just like Rayman 2, which controlled great, so at least this game is that. The racing was by far the more interesting game mode, as you do actually race on foot and there actually is a fair amount of platforming. These tracks, while not amazing, at least had some interesting parts to them, and I do remember having a lot of fun with them. Nowadays, yeah, most of them are pretty simplistic. The later ones, though, those are pretty good. The AI is also like way too easy in this game. You will never have any problem beating the AI. If you want to have some real fun with this game, you're going to need another person or two or three. I think it's pretty cool how you get to play as a bunch of other Rayman characters here, characters that you normally would never get to play as, so that's cool. And then there's the arena mode, which is very basic. It is really just the combat from Rayman 2. There's really not all that much to it, and I remember that I was able to finish this really quickly, and even nowadays I'm like, wow, this is really short. There's a time attack mode if you really just want to keep playing this game. I remember my biggest problem as a kid was that this game just didn't really have much to offer, and looking back now, yeah, it really doesn't. It's quite shallow. If you're not playing with a bunch of friends, like, you'll be done with this game in like 2 or 3 hours, maybe like 3.5, and you'll probably never come back to it. There's just not a lot to this game. It's a pretty mediocre party game, and there seems to be tons of differences between the different versions of these games, especially the PS1 version where it's just the racing. Like, why are there so many different versions? There's plenty of people that have probably gone over all the different versions of this game, so check those out if you're really interested about the game, but I do not recommend it. Alright, now we're getting to the real good stuff. Here we have the original Rayman. I know it might be a little bit of a hot take to have it this low on the list, but I just think that all the other games on this list are just a little bit better than this game. I think this game is great, though. It is one of the best 2D platformers on the PlayStation. The plot of the game was pretty simple. It's a nice, happy, friendly world that Rayman lives in, and then the evil Mr. Dark steals the Platoon, causing all the Electoons, these tiny little beings that keep harmony and peace in the world, to scatter, and Rayman has to go collect them all. While the plot of the game is very simple, this game has a ton of charm and personality, and it looks great. The game looks super unique, is very colorful and vibrant, and there's really no other game that looks like it, especially on the PS1. But don't let those cutesy, colorful graphics fool you. The original Rayman is not messing around. It is easily the hardest game on this list and one of the hardest 2D platformers you will ever find. You play as the titular Rayman, our limbless hero, as he goes through these levels looking for all the Electoons trapped in their cages and really just trying to get out of the level without losing all your lives. Despite this game not being the fastest 2D platformer, as a majority of the time you are walking, the game makes up for it with its great controls that are super smooth and precise, and its really interesting level design. The level design is some of the best 2D level design from that era of gaming. Each level feels very handcrafted and personal, and each level is very well done. There's 6 worlds throughout the game, and they all have different themes and aesthetics, and I really did enjoy all of them, despite a number of them just completely kicking my ass and me dying over and over and over. And there's a lot of unique little gimmicks that come in, such as shrinking and getting bigger. And throughout the game, Rayman does get a bunch of abilities. These aren't the most exciting abilities, like he gets to grab onto a ledge, or run, or throw his fists like a boomerang, or use his hair as a helicopter, but it does add variety and it does mix up these levels, and I do like them. Truth be told, I really don't have that many issues, if any, with the original Rayman. I don't like that you need to 100% the game to get to the last level. Like, I really don't like that. And while the game is very challenging, I think for the most part it's pretty fair. There is some bullshit here and there, and it is overly hard and very punishing at a few points, but I think for the most part it is challenging in a good way, and it will definitely keep you on your toes. It's just that I think the other games on this list, again, are just a little bit better than this game, but this game should not be missed. It is a great platformer. And I know about Rayman Redemption, it's great, but I'm not including it because we're only looking at official games. If we included that, this game would be higher on the list, though. And here we have Rayman Origins, released in 2011 by Ubisoft. They really went back to Rayman's roots here with a cutesy, fun 2D platformer with a really kooky story. It sees Rayman, Glowbox, and two teensies accidentally waking up the livid dead with their loud snoring. After being woken up, they capture all the Electoons, and it's up to Rayman and his friends to save them all and save the world. The story is, again, very basic and very weird, and to be honest, I have no idea what this has to do with Rayman's origin story, because Rayman just kind of appears with his friends here. So let's just get the most obvious thing out of the way. The presentation for this game is very well done. It is excellent. The graphics are great. Like, it has an incredible art style. Even all these years later, it still looks great. The animation is superb. Really, I just love this hand-drawn art style. It's really an evolution of the original Rayman. The music is also very well done with a ton of different catchy tunes. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, it is a fast-paced, fun 2D platformer. It feels a lot like the original Rayman, but it is significantly faster. The movement feels really smooth though. This game just handles like a dream. When it comes to the actual progression through the game, it is pretty similar to the original Rayman. You are for the most part moving left to right, doing a lot of platforming challenges, defeating some enemies, and getting a bunch of collectibles. You have to save the Electoons, and you can find their cages hidden throughout. You collect these little like fairy things, and if you collect enough, you save more Electoons. At times it can feel like a collectathon, but it is a fun collectathon thanks to, again, the great controls, engaging levels, and just like the first game, you get a bunch of new abilities throughout the game to keep things varied. This game has a ton of exciting, fun levels throughout it, and there really isn't like any stinkers in this game. Like, almost every level is good to great, and when you get to the end, things start getting pretty crazy and actually pretty challenging. It doesn't get anywhere near the original Raymans, but I didn't think the original game needed to get that hard. Collecting everything is fun. The game does have 4-player co-op if you all want to play together. It's much better than, say, New Super Mario Bros. And the game doesn't go on too long either. You don't have to collect everything to beat it. There are some fun extra levels though where you chase these treasure chests, and to get the secret final world you do need to finish all of those levels, but you do not have to get anywhere near 100%ing the game. I will say I was not a fan of these boss fights, but that's really my only complaint. This is a great 2D platformer that I think is just a little bit better than the original Rayman thanks to its smooth controls, and I just like the levels a bit more. You should really check this one out. Now, these next 3 games were very hard to decide, but I begrudgingly have at number 3, Rayman 3. Now, Rayman 3 had a lot to live up to, especially because Rayman 2 was just so beloved, and I think Rayman 3 is still a great game, and I do think that it is a tad underrated these days. The plot of this game is just completely wild, off the walls, and feels almost random at times. It really drops like everything from Rayman 2, and it just goes for this crazy story that is just really weird. It's about this black lum named Andre who creates a bunch of these creatures known as the Hoodlums that look like scarecrows and really just kind of go after everybody. There is a bunch of twists and turns that go on in this story that is unlike any other Rayman plot, and it really is just weird. The game is pretty similar to Rayman 2. It is a mostly linear 3D platformer that sees Rayman jumping, climbing, using power-ups, and now throwing his fists again. But there are some changes here. Like I just mentioned, you're no longer throwing the orbs like in Rayman 2, you're back to throwing your fists. The combat actually feels very fun in this game, locking on and then strafing around them to throw your fists. It's really fun, and I actually do think that the combat is better than Rayman 2's. It's probably the best combat that the series has ever had. Instead of permanent power-ups, now you get 5 temporary power-ups. You find these cans and they give Rayman a power-up for a bit of time. Usually it's just for a little section of a level. Like, one ability allows Rayman to shoot rockets instead of his fists, another allows him to latch onto stuff, kind of like a grappling hook almost, and he can swing with it. Another allows him to fly vertically, leading to some very vertical areas when you do come across that power-up. I think these are all pretty good. They're a really good extension of Rayman's abilities, and they're all fun to use. This game has a very strange like point combo system to it. Yeah, by defeating enemies, well, just attacking enemies, collecting these gems, or doing some platforming challenges, you do get points, and you can link all of these together with combos to get even more points. When you have a power up, everything doubles also. This game really does have a hurry mentality with this combo system, and I think it is kind of odd a game like this would have that, but you know, I think it was fine enough. The game even has these fun grinding levels in between levels where you go through this funky looking hallway, I guess, and you just grind on these lines and try to get as many points as you can. And you know what? The music during these levels is great. The music in this game is actually pretty good. Overall, I really do think that Rayman 3 was one of the best platformers of this generation, and there was a lot of good platformers during this generation. My biggest issue, and really only issue with the game, is it's just too short and not as replayable as Rayman 2. It's not as long as Rayman 2, and it doesn't have the same level of replayability. But I wholeheartedly recommend this game, and I think it is absolutely worth playing, especially to fans of the genre. In the number 2 spot, we have the latest mainline Rayman game that is Rayman Legends, released all the way back in 2013 initially. The game takes place after Rayman Origins. Rayman, Glowbox, and the Teensies have been sleeping for an entire century, and during that time, the Bubble Dreamers' nightmares grew way bigger, and now all the Teensies have been captured, and it's up to Rayman and friends to save everyone. When it comes to the gameplay, the game really carries on the same style of gameplay from Rayman Origins, where up to 4 players simultaneously make their way through various levels, collecting a bunch of stuff. You still collect lums, and you get these from just about everything. They're all over these levels, and you have to free the Teensies now, which are hidden throughout the levels. The controls are basically perfect. They are buttery smooth. They're even somehow better than Rayman Origins. Like, they're just great. While the general gameplay and progression might be basically the same as Origins, this game has so many levels with so many unique little gimmicks to it. Like, there are just levels upon levels upon levels in this game, and they all look fantastic, and it is great to play through all of them. This game features around 120 levels. Yeah, that's a lot, and 40 of them are remastered from Rayman Origins, and have actually been beefed up a little bit graphically. And so with so many levels, you might think, well, there's got to be a bunch that suck, or a bunch that just reuse other stuff. No, these are all good to great to fantastic levels, and barely any of them reuse like anything. So many of them are just incredibly unique, and are just so memorable and so fun to go through. You would be surprised how many levels really are actually great. Like, I wouldn't expect a game with so many levels to have so many great handcrafted levels. I figured that it'd be a little bit of an autopilot situation, but no, they're actually all hella good. A lot of them have really interesting gimmicks and interesting quirks to them that just make them incredibly engaging to play through. Like anything that has to do with Murphy, returning from Rayman 2 and 3. I think his stuff is good. It's actually pretty fun to go through it if you're playing in single player. Or then the rhythm levels. I mean, the rhythm levels are the best levels in the game. It's what they showed off. It's what stands out, where you move to an entire song. They got Black Betty, they got Eye of the Tiger, and a few others in there as well, where it really does keep up with the rhythm, and it's just phenomenal. A ton of these levels have remix versions where they're more challenging, or you have to go through it super quickly, or something's changed about it. The game is daily and weekly challenges. Like, this game is just ready to tip the bucket when it comes to how full it is with content. Like, it is ridiculous how much content that there is in this game. This is easily the biggest, longest, most complete Rayman game on this list. I actually just had so much fun with it that I basically just about 100%ed it. And I remember it took me well over 20-25 hours to do that. Like, there is just a ton in this game, and I had an absolute blast. I could not put it down. This is easily one of the best 2D platformers ever made, and one of the very best 2D platformers of the last, decade, along with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I think everybody should absolutely try Rayman Legends. It has so much going for it. It's cheap, and it's on every platform also. Just try it. It was really hard to not just immediately say Rayman Legends is the best Rayman game, and depending on the day of the week, I probably would say Rayman Legends is the best of the Rayman games, but the day that I'm recording this video, I'm saying it's the second best, but by such a teeny tiny margin that it really doesn't matter. In fact, I could say that number 1 and 2 are number 1, basically. And so here we have Rayman 2, The Great Escape. If you really couldn't guess that it was Rayman 2, especially at this point in time, then I really don't know. Rayman 2, The Great Escape is easily the most beloved of all the Rayman games. And the game is one of my favorite 3D platformers of all time. There's no question about that. I think it's a fantastic game, and it arguably is the best Rayman game. But I'm sure I could say the same thing about Legends being the best one. Either way, nobody's going to deny that Rayman Legends and Rayman 2 are both fantastic games. The game is about Rayman going up against the interstellar robo-pirates led by Admiral Razorbeard. At the start of the game, they've really taken over and conquered the world and captured Rayman, but Rayman escapes, and it's up to him to save everyone and everything. Now, while the original Rayman was pretty cute and friendly, Rayman 2, especially from the beginning of the game, is a very dark game. There are tons of beautiful, cute levels, of course, but I'm talking from a pure theme and story perspective. It's a very dark game. Despite that, it's my favorite plot of the Rayman games, and Razorbeard I think is the best antagonist of the Rayman series. I really love the world in this game. It is so unique and weird and just different, and there are so many just odd cutscenes, but it's not too crazy like Rayman 3. It's just weird, and I really enjoyed that. Now, the gameplay is obviously very different from Rayman 1, Origins, and Legends. It is a 3D platformer that sees Rayman going through mostly linear levels, collecting lums, participating in lots of challenging platforming areas, and of course getting into combat with the pirates. With the game being subtitled The Great Escape, you know you're going to be doing a lot of rescuing in this game. You're going to have to save teensies, you're going to have to save lums in cages, and you're going to need to save a certain amount of them to continue throughout the game. And if you don't, you'll have to replay levels and find stuff, but I never found that an issue. Just like the original Rayman, as you progress through the game, you do get a ton of different abilities that really expands Rayman's arsenal and keeps things interesting. There's also a ton of gimmicks this game introduces, and I think they're all actually really well executed and really well done. It's not some junk that's in there for one level, or it controls like ass and it doesn't belong in a platformer. No, these are all really well done. I'd say that the reason I think Rayman 2 is my favorite Rayman sometimes is because of the levels. I think the levels are just really well done. All of the levels just feel very different from each other. Like no two levels honestly feel the same, and it's really refreshing, and it's just really nice to play through. The pacing is just absolutely superb. Sure, there are some reoccurring elements here, like the updrafts that Rayman goes through with his flying hair, or when you're on these giant, like, purple plums and you, like, ride them across lava, or when you get on these rocket creature things and go really fast through some of these areas, and then near the end of the game, you can eventually fly with it, and this was always awesome to me. This is one of my favorite levels. Every level just feels very unique. The combat in this game is pretty alright. It's not as smooth as, say, Rayman 3, but I think it is still pretty good where you lock on and throw the orbs. I mean, it's pretty basic for the most part, and the bosses are also pretty easy, but it's fine enough. It's passable. Another aspect that I really do love about Rayman 2 is the game's soundtrack, its charm, and general presentation. I just think all of these absolutely nail it out of the park. It's my favorite soundtrack in the Rayman games, which is actually saying a lot. Rayman 3 and Legends got some really good stuff in there. And I think that the game's charm is just absolutely spot on. The presentation is great, and the game just, as corny as it sounds, just feels magical many times. The way the game presents itself, the way the game presents the story and the characters, and how weird everything is and how odd everything is with its sound effects and general aesthetic, like, I think it's just really well done, and something like this really was never done again, not even in the Rayman series. They veered off into a different direction after this. I love the game's tone, and I think that the gameplay is not only really engaging, but also, again, just really fun. It's just a really great 3D platformer that I think just about anybody can enjoy if you like platformers, and I think that Rayman 2 really is one of the best. It's arguably Ubisoft's, like, best game ever, along with, like, Assassin's Creed 2, 4, and Rayman Legends. And that's why on some days, I think Rayman 2 is the best Rayman game. Again, other days I think it's Rayman Legends, but either way you can't go wrong with those two. When it comes to playing Rayman 2, I mean, there's like so many different versions of Rayman 2 that there are like 2-hour long videos explaining all the differences, so I'm not going to get into it. I've played the N64 version through, I've played through the Dreamcast version, I've played a little bit of the PS1 version, I've played through the PS2 version, and I've dabbled a little bit in the 3DS version. Like, yeah, there's a lot of versions of Rayman 2, and most of them are pretty solid. But that's it for this video. Tell me your favorite Rayman game down below, or anything else you want to see me rank. If you're going to go after me for not looking at like the Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance versions of these games, well, I just don't care about them and I've never played them. So there you go. Anyway, have a good one, everyone. I'll see everyone later. Bye.